The reality you long to experience does not begin on the outside. It does not begin with luck, opportunity, the approval of others, or the passing of time. It begins with one invisible decision, a single assumption accepted so deeply that it becomes more real to you than the circumstances standing before your eyes. Most people spend their lives waiting for evidence before they allow themselves to believe. They say, "When I see the change, I will know it is possible. When the money comes, I will feel secure. When love arrives, I will feel worthy. When success appears, I will become confident." Yet this way of living places the power of your inner world into the hands of your outer world. It asks the visible to create the invisible. But life unfolds in the opposite direction. Everything that eventually becomes visible begins as something unseen. Every building first existed as an idea. Every invention was once a thought no one else could see. Every masterpiece was once hidden within the imagination of its creator. The invisible always comes first, and the visible follows. The same principle applies to your own life. Your future is not waiting somewhere ahead of you. It is quietly taking shape within the assumptions you repeatedly entertain today. The conversations you rehearse within yourself, the identity you accept, the expectations you carry into each day, and the feelings you repeatedly return to are all contributing to the reality that gradually unfolds before you. An assumption is not merely a hopeful wish. It is an inner agreement. It is a decision about what is true, regardless of temporary appearances. Every day you assume countless things without realizing it. You assume whether people appreciate you. You assume whether opportunities exist for you. You assume whether life is difficult or supportive. You assume whether you are capable or limited. These assumptions become so familiar that they begin to feel like facts. But familiarity is not the same as truth. Many people inherit assumptions they never consciously chose. They grow up believing they must struggle because they watch struggle all around them. They assume happiness is rare because disappointment has become familiar. They assume they are overlooked because they have repeated that story for years. These ideas settle quietly into the mind until they become invisible filters through which every experience is interpreted. The remarkable thing is that life continually responds to these hidden expectations, not because the world is trying to reward or punish anyone, but because perception shapes experience. You notice what aligns with your beliefs. You act according to the identity you accept. You make decisions that support the story you have been telling yourself. Eventually, the outer world begins to resemble the inner one. If you wish to experience a different reality, begin by asking a different question. Instead of asking, "How can I change my life?" ask, "What have I been assuming about my life?" That question changes everything. Perhaps you have been assuming that success belongs to other people. Perhaps you have assumed that meaningful relationships are difficult to find. Perhaps you have assumed that your best days are behind you, or that your dreams require impossible circumstances before they can become real. Every one of those assumptions quietly shapes your daily experience. Now imagine choosing a new one, not because the evidence already supports it, but because you have decided that your inner world deserves a new foundation. Imagine beginning each day with the quiet conviction that life is working with you rather than against you. Imagine accepting that opportunities are constantly finding their way toward you. Imagine believing that you possess wisdom greater than fear, strength greater than doubt, and possibilities greater than your current circumstances suggest. Notice how differently you would walk. Notice how differently you would speak. Notice how differently you would interpret setbacks. The circumstances may not change immediately, but you would. And when you change, your choices change. Your responses change. Your confidence changes. Your relationships begin to shift because you are showing up differently. Your attention naturally moves toward possibility instead of limitation. Transformation often appears gradual from the outside, but it always begins in a single invisible moment within. Many people underestimate the importance of their inner conversations. Yet these silent dialogues become the blueprint of tomorrow. If your mind continually repeats stories of failure, rejection, scarcity, and fear, Those stories influence every action you take. But if your inner conversations become filled with confidence, gratitude, peace, and expectation, your entire experience begins moving in another direction. You do not need to force yourself to believe something that feels impossible overnight. Instead, gently invite your mind to become familiar with a better possibility. Allow yourself to imagine what it would feel like if the life you desire were already unfolding, not as an escape from reality, but as preparation for it. There is extraordinary power in becoming emotionally acquainted with the future you wish to experience. When gratitude is practiced before visible results appear, it transforms your relationship with the present moment. When peace is cultivated before every problem disappears, it becomes independent of circumstances. When confidence is embraced before every goal is achieved, it becomes part of your identity rather than a reward you hope to earn. The greatest changes often happen quietly, no dramatic announcement, no sudden applause. Simply a person who wakes one morning and decides that the old story no longer deserves another chapter. That decision may seem invisible, but it changes everything. There will be moments when the outer world appears unchanged. Doubt may whisper that nothing is happening. Old habits may attempt to reclaim your attention. Familiar fears may return, asking you to abandon your new assumption. Do not mistake delay for denial. Seeds spend time beneath the soil before anyone sees evidence of growth. Yet during that hidden season, transformation is already taking place. Your assumptions work in much the same way. Every time you choose faith over fear, possibility over limitation, gratitude over complaint, or confidence over uncertainty, you strengthen a new pattern within yourself. Eventually, that pattern becomes natural. What once required conscious effort becomes effortless. What once felt impossible becomes familiar. What once seemed distant becomes present. Remember that your attention is precious. Wherever attention consistently flows, energy follows. Whatever you repeatedly contemplate gains influence within your experience. If your attention constantly rests upon obstacles, obstacles begin occupying your emotional world. If your attention consistently rests upon possibility, creativity begins expanding within you. Choose carefully what deserves your mental residence. Not every thought deserves your agreement. Not every fear deserves your belief. Not every memory deserves to define your future. You have the remarkable ability to observe a thought without accepting it as truth. You can notice fear without allowing it to become your identity. You can acknowledge present circumstances without allowing them to determine your expectations. Freedom begins with that awareness. The future is shaped less by what happens to you than by the meaning you consistently assign to what happens. Two people may face identical circumstances, yet create completely different lives because they carry different assumptions into the experience. One expects defeat, the other expects growth. One searches for reasons to quit, the other searches for reasons to continue. The difference is invisible at first, yet undeniable over time. Your life gradually mirrors the story you consistently believe about yourself. If you believe you are becoming wiser, you begin noticing wisdom. If you believe abundance is available, you recognize opportunities that once escaped your attention. If you believe you are worthy of meaningful relationships, you naturally begin interacting with greater openness and confidence. The assumption changes the perception. The perception changes the choices. The choices change the results. There is no need to fight your current reality with frustration. Resistance often strengthens the very thing you wish to leave behind. Instead, acknowledge where you are while quietly choosing where your attention will remain. Allow your imagination to become a workshop rather than a place of worry. Let it become a space where you repeatedly visit the person you are becoming rather than the person you fear remaining. Each day, ask yourself a simple question. If the life I desire were already unfolding, how would I think today? How would you speak? How would you walk? How would you treat others? How would you respond to temporary setbacks? How would you use this ordinary day? Those answers contain more power than you realize. The extraordinary future is built from ordinary moments lived with extraordinary assumptions. You do not need permission to begin. You do not need perfect conditions. You do not need universal agreement. You need only the willingness to accept a new possibility before your eyes can confirm it. The world has always been shaped by individuals who believed something inwardly before anyone else could see it outwardly. Every meaningful transformation begins in silence. Every lasting victory begins within. Every remarkable future begins with a single assumption courageously held. So choose carefully what you repeatedly accept as true about yourself. Choose thoughts that expand rather than diminish you. Choose expectations that invite possibility rather than limitation. Choose an identity that reflects the person you are committed to becoming instead of the person you have merely been. Your assumptions are not small things. They are the unseen architects of tomorrow. The life you desire is not asking you to force reality. It is inviting you to become inwardly aligned with the future you wish to experience. The moment you choose a higher assumption and faithfully return to it each day, something profound begins to change. At first, the change is invisible. Then it becomes noticeable within your attitude. Soon it influences your decisions. Before long, it reshapes your relationships, your opportunities, your confidence, and your direction. One assumption becomes one decision. One decision becomes one identity. One identity becomes one entirely different life. Never underestimate the quiet power of what you consistently believe, because the reality you desire does not begin when the world changes. It begins the moment you do. Do not concern yourself with measuring your progress every hour. Growth rarely announces itself while it is happening. Think of the dawn. No one can point to the exact second when night becomes morning, yet slowly, almost imperceptibly, darkness gives way to light. Your inner transformation follows the same rhythm. If you constantly interrupt the process to ask whether anything is changing, you distract yourself from the very work that is producing the change. Instead, remain faithful to the assumption you have chosen, allowing it to settle deeper into your awareness with every passing day. There is a tendency to believe that imagination is separate from reality, that it is merely a pleasant escape from the facts of life. Yet every meaningful achievement begins with someone seeing beyond what currently exists. The architect sees the completed structure before the first foundation is laid. The artist beholds the finished masterpiece while the canvas is still blank. The inventor lives mentally with the solution long before the world recognizes its usefulness. In the same way, the life you desire deserves to become familiar within your own awareness before it takes shape in visible form. This is not about pretending that difficulties do not exist. It is about refusing to allow temporary appearances to dictate your permanent identity. A traveler crossing a mountain does not conclude that the destination has disappeared simply because the path has become steep. The challenge does not cancel the destination. It simply becomes part of the journey. Likewise, moments of uncertainty are not proof that your vision has failed. They are opportunities to remain loyal to what you have accepted inwardly, even when your senses invite you to doubt it. Notice how often people allow a single event to redefine their entire self-concept. One rejection convinces them they are unworthy. One setback persuades them they are incapable. One delay makes them believe they have been forgotten by life itself. Yet no single event possesses the authority to define you unless you grant it that authority. Circumstances pass through your experience, but identity is something you choose repeatedly. Every morning offers another opportunity to remember who you have decided to become. The mind naturally drifts toward what it has practiced most often. If worry has been rehearsed for years, it will seem effortless. If self-criticism has become habitual, it may feel like the most natural voice within you. Do not mistake habit for truth. A familiar thought is simply one that has been repeated often enough. It carries no greater authority than any new thought you intentionally cultivate today. The more frequently you return to an empowering assumption, the more natural it becomes until it quietly replaces the old pattern. Consider the difference between hoping and assuming. Hope often places fulfillment somewhere in the future. It says, perhaps one day this will happen. Assumption quietly declares, this is becoming my reality, and I will continue living from that understanding. Hope waits for permission from the outer world. Assumption begins creating a new inner atmosphere immediately. One keeps fulfillment at a distance, while the other welcomes it into the present moment through conviction. Your emotional life is deeply connected to the assumptions you carry. Fear grows wherever limitation is accepted as inevitable. Confidence expands wherever possibility is embraced as natural. Gratitude flourishes wherever abundance is recognized, even before it becomes visible. The emotions you repeatedly experience are not random visitors. They often reveal the beliefs quietly operating beneath the surface of your awareness. Rather than fighting the emotion itself, gently examine the assumption that gave birth to it. Imagine carrying within you the unwavering certainty that every experience is contributing to your highest growth. How differently would you interpret delays? How differently would you respond when plans change unexpectedly? Instead of seeing obstacles as evidence that life is opposing you, you might begin recognizing them as moments refining your character, strengthening your patience, or directing you towards something even greater than your original expectation. The event itself may remain the same, but its meaning transforms entirely through the assumption you choose. Many spend years attempting to change external habits, while neglecting the identity beneath those habits. Yet actions naturally follow identity. When a person genuinely accepts themselves as disciplined, consistent actions begin to feel natural. When someone accepts themselves as healthy, healthier choices become less of a struggle. Identity quietly governs behavior. Therefore, the deepest transformation does not begin with forcing different actions. It begins by embracing a different understanding of who you are. This is why repeating empty words without conviction often produces little change. The power does not lie in the phrases themselves, but in the meaning you allow them to carry. Speak words that awaken genuine expectation within you. Reflect on ideas that expand your awareness instead of merely decorating your thoughts. Let each statement become something you are willing to inhabit emotionally rather than simply recite intellectually. There is immense value in silence. The world constantly invites your attention toward fear, comparison, urgency, and distraction. Yet within moments of quiet reflection, you rediscover the creative center of your own awareness. In silence, you remember that your greatest influence is not the noise surrounding you, but the state of mind from which you choose to live. A few peaceful moments spent nurturing your chosen assumption may accomplish more than hours spent reacting to every changing circumstance. Do not underestimate the influence of gratitude experienced before visible evidence appears. Gratitude is not merely appreciation for what has already happened. It is an acknowledgement that life is richer than your present senses can fully perceive. When gratitude becomes your atmosphere instead of your reaction, your perspective broadens. You begin noticing opportunities that anxiety would have overlooked. You recognize connections where fear would have seen separation. You discover possibilities hidden behind situations that once appeared ordinary. Your imagination was never meant to become a theater of endless worry. Yet many people unconsciously rehearse failure with remarkable consistency. They picture conversations that end in disappointment, opportunities that dissolve before arriving, and futures filled with lack. Then they wonder why confidence feels distant. Every mental rehearsal leaves an impression upon the mind. If you repeatedly rehearse limitation, limitation becomes emotionally familiar. But if you consistently rehearse wisdom, success, peace, and fulfillment, these qualities gradually become familiar as well. And familiarity shapes expectation. Ask yourself throughout the day, from which version of myself am I responding? Are you reacting as the person still convinced by yesterday's limitations, or are you responding as the individual who has already embraced a greater identity? This simple question interrupts unconscious habits and gently redirects your awareness toward the future you have chosen to embody. Over time, these seemingly small moments accumulate into an entirely new way of living. Every assumption carries with it a certain atmosphere. The assumption of lack produces tension, urgency, and comparison. The assumption of abundance creates patience, generosity, and trust. The assumption of failure narrows your vision until every challenge appears overwhelming. The assumption of possibility expands your awareness until solutions begin appearing where none seemed to exist before. You do not merely think your assumptions, you live within the emotional climate they create. Observe children for a moment. They often enter imagined worlds with complete sincerity. For those moments, their imagination is entirely real to them. They are explorers, builders, adventurers, and creators, because they have not yet learned to limit themselves through endless calculation. As adults, many lose this capacity, replacing wonder with doubt. Yet the creative faculty remains. It simply waits to be directed consciously instead of carelessly. The imagination that once played without fear can become the instrument through which you reshape your understanding of what is possible. Whenever you encounter something in your life that appears contrary to your desired direction, resist the temptation to declare it final. Every circumstance is temporary unless you continue giving it permanence through repeated agreement. What you consistently return to in thought gains influence over your experience. Therefore, if an event does not represent the reality you wish to cultivate, acknowledge it without allowing it to become your permanent conclusion. There is a remarkable difference between observing a circumstance and identifying with it. You may observe financial difficulty without becoming a person who believes lack defines them. You may witness disappointment without concluding that disappointment is your destiny. You may experience uncertainty without accepting uncertainty as your permanent home. The outer event is temporary, but the meaning you attach to it determines how long it remains active within your awareness. Every day, you are deciding whether an experience is simply passing through your life, or whether it will become part of the story you continue to tell yourself. The stories you repeat are powerful because they quietly become expectations. If someone asks about your life and you instinctively recount every struggle, every setback, every disappointment, you reinforce those experiences within your own consciousness. This does not mean you deny what has happened. It means you become intentional about which narrative receives your energy. You can acknowledge where you have been while refusing to let your past become the author of your future. There is no need to carry yesterday's assumptions into tomorrow, simply because they have accompanied you for many years. The length of time you have believed something does not determine its truth. A belief held for 20 years can be replaced in a single moment of genuine realization. That moment may not instantly alter every visible condition, but it changes the direction from which your life begins to unfold. A ship changes its destination the instant its course changes, even though it may still appear surrounded by the same waters for a time. Become attentive to the language you use about yourself. Words are not empty sounds. They are expressions of the assumptions living within you. When you repeatedly say, "Nothing ever works for me," your mind begins searching for evidence to support that conclusion. When you declare, "I always struggle," your attention naturally notices every instance that reinforces the statement. But imagine replacing those familiar declarations with new ones that reflect the person you are becoming. Quietly affirm that you are growing in wisdom, attracting meaningful opportunities, and becoming more confident each day. These are not attempts to deceive yourself. They are deliberate choices regarding the direction in which you wish your awareness to grow. Your attention functions much like sunlight in a garden. Whatever receives consistent light becomes stronger. If you continually illuminate fear, fear expands. If you continually illuminate gratitude, gratitude deepens. If you repeatedly focus on limitation, limitation appears everywhere you look. But when you intentionally direct your attention toward possibility, your mind begins recognizing paths that previously remained hidden beneath the shadows of doubt. It is often the smallest assumptions that shape the largest outcomes. Someone assumes they are welcome wherever they go, and they naturally enter conversations with warmth and openness. Another assumes they will be rejected, and without realizing it, they become hesitant, guarded, and withdrawn. The world responds differently to each, yet both experiences originated from assumptions, carried long before the interaction began. In this way, life often reflects not only what you do, but the state from which you do it. Think about how differently you would approach your goals if failure were no longer part of your self-definition. Imagine beginning each project with the calm expectation that you possess everything necessary to learn, adapt, and succeed. Notice how much creative energy becomes available when it is no longer consumed by constant self-doubt. The mind functions with far greater clarity when it is not preoccupied with defending old limitations. Many people wait until they feel confident before taking meaningful action. Yet confidence often grows through repeated alignment with a chosen assumption. The individual who believes they are becoming capable continues moving forward despite temporary uncertainty. With each step, experience reinforces the new identity until confidence becomes a natural consequence rather than a prerequisite. There is wisdom in refusing to judge your life by isolated moments. One difficult day reveals nothing about the direction of your journey. One unexpected obstacle cannot erase the assumptions you have been carefully cultivating. Every meaningful transformation includes moments that appear contradictory when viewed too closely. Stand back and observe your life from a wider perspective. You may discover that what once seemed like interruption was actually preparation. Your imagination deserves to become a sanctuary rather than a battlefield. Too often it is occupied by endless rehearsals of conversations that never happen, fears that never materialize, and disappointments that exist only in anticipation. Every minute spent entertaining these imagined limitations strengthens emotional patterns that need not exist. Instead, allow your imagination to become a place where peace is practiced, abundance is welcomed, relationships are harmonious, and your highest potential is experienced with sincerity. The mind cannot remain unchanged while repeatedly dwelling in such an atmosphere. There is extraordinary freedom in understanding that you are not required to earn your worthiness. Worthiness is not a reward granted after enough achievements have been collected. It is the foundation from which healthy achievement naturally grows. When you assume you are worthy of love, you stop settling for relationships built upon fear. When you assume you are worthy of abundance, you become more willing to recognize and accept opportunities. When you assume you are worthy of peace, you stop believing that struggle must always accompany success. Every assumption carries an invisible momentum. The longer you remain faithful to it, the more naturally your thoughts, emotions, decisions, and actions begin moving in harmony with it. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A single moment of inspiration is valuable, but daily faithfulness to your chosen identity reshapes the deeper patterns of consciousness. Small, repeated alignments gradually produce extraordinary results. Do not become discouraged if old thoughts occasionally return. Habits formed over years do not disappear simply because you have chosen a new direction. What matters is not the appearance of the old thought, but your response to it. You no longer have to welcome every thought into your identity. You can observe it, recognize that it belongs to an older way of thinking, and gently return your attention to the assumption you have consciously selected. Every time you do this, you weaken the influence of the old pattern and strengthen the new one. There will come moments when your external world begins presenting subtle confirmations. A conversation unfolds differently than expected. An opportunity appears unexpectedly. A long-standing obstacle begins to soften. These moments are not accidents to be dismissed lightly. They remind you that inner change inevitably finds expression through outer experience. Welcome these signs with gratitude, but do not become dependent upon them. Your confidence must remain rooted in your inner conviction rather than temporary evidence. As your assumptions evolve, you may notice that certain habits, environments, or even relationships no longer resonate with the person you are becoming. This is a natural part of growth. Transformation is not merely about adding new experiences, it is also about releasing identities that can no longer accompany you. Do not fear this process. Every meaningful expansion creates space by gently dissolving what no longer belongs in your life. Your daily routine becomes far more significant when viewed through this understanding. The quiet moments before the day begins, the thoughts you entertain while walking, the conversations you have with yourself,